Good morning. It's Pause with Elizabeth Elenor, and today we're talking about the macro and the micro and looking through the looking glass because it's our 6th anniversary for my business this September, as well as my birthday, and we're going to be taking people through the whole process of creation from the very start of the process all the way through. So I would definitely advise that you jump into Awakening Magical Women, because there's a whole heap of stuff in there that we're going to be doing, including opening 6 portals. Because if you've been following me for a little while, you'll know that my client avatar, her name is Alice, and it took me a little while. She was named Alice 6 years ago, but it took me a little while to work out that it was Alice from Alice in Wonderland, because she's unplugging, right? She's unplugging from the matrix. And aren't we all wanting to do that more, right? So I'd love for you to say hi in the comments and let me know if you're watching and where you're watching from, and hashtag replay if you're watching the replay. So let's dive into it, because one of the very first steps and the very first portal to open is the recognition that we are not separate, that we are an atom, that all atoms are consciousness, right? And that all atoms are vibrating throughout the universe as well as within our body. So this macro energy, right? This energy that is vibrating at all different types of frequencies, but has this one element of oneness, collective consciousness, right? There's one universal intelligence, source energy, whatever your language is, it has this one vibration. But within that vibration, as it became recognized that it wanted to experience itself, it individualized to be able to relate. And so those individual expressions became the plants and the animals and the humans and the aliens and the planets and all of these things, right? To experience like this environment. So it's sort of like we're the garden and there's a horticulturalist that is looking over and foreseeing the way the garden grows and the way the garden is tended and looked after and all of those things. But each individual part of that garden, each individual part of that looking glass, right, has its own individual expression. That's us. However, if we get stuck believing that we're just in this individual body and that this life that we're living is, we were born and we die, then we see ourselves as separate. Now, that's okay, I suppose, if that's what you want to live. But when you see yourself in separation, what happens is you start defining the other things around you as different, and you judge those things as different, and you see yourself as in survival mode. That's what happens, because now you're surviving, you're not thriving as part of the system. And this is where we find our planet, right? We're all in survival mode, and we get stuck in that limitation, that individuation, which, has its own mechanism. We wake up in the morning and that mechanism is our unconscious, and it just starts talking and making decisions and judgments and assessments and definitions and labels and all of those things. And it just starts mind chatter going on about what we've got to do in, the day, and what we did yesterday, and was it good enough, or was it perfect, or are you capable of doing X, Y, Z today, right? And it just like keeps going and going and going. And if you do not take the reins and make some sort of adjustment to that or switch it off in some way, it will run your life forever and a day. And that's when you go down what I call the mangy rabbit hole, right? You go down the wrong rabbit hole where everything stuffs up, everything's a problem, everything's a pressure. You feel like you're, struggling to make ends meet. You feel like everyone's got expectations of you. You're looking after everybody else instead of looking after your internal environment. You just don't have any time for your own self-development, growth, spirituality, because everything's an external experience. You've got people relying on you and people pushing you to be a certain way, and you've got masks on. So it looks like you've got it all together, right? But on the inside, you've got this yearning to be something else, because regardless if we have that belief or not, our soul knows that we are part of a wider, bigger picture. We are part of the whole, because it knows that its whole journey is to experience itself as an individual, yes, and to grow and become more light, which is more of the creator, more of the consciousness that knows itself as the being that is making this all up. And I don't want to say being because it implies that there's a man in heaven on a throne or whatever, but it's not a being, but it could be a celestial body, right? Like, who are we to know what this consciousness entails, because it's so complex and so intelligent. Like, just look at the beautiful plants that we have. Like, I've got these little plants. Like, look at the two different plants here that actually had to have some sort of intelligence to create itself, to have these little marks on it and to grow these leaves the way it does. Like, the intelligence of the whole system to create individual expressions as part of the whole is beyond our comprehension, right? And I remember there was a time in my life when I was younger and I was working all this stuff out that I just wanted to know it all. And I remember thinking, if I don't work it all out, or if when I die I don't find all of the stuff out, I'm going to be totally pissed off. But as you get older, and I've been doing this for 28 years now, like working this stuff out, and I got into quantum physics and epigenetics and the spiritual realm, and I did past life regression, and I've done a lot of stuff to get me here, and recognized myself as a student and a teacher, as the micro and the macro, as the innocent and the master, all of those things, right? Like, learning as I go and expanding as I go. The more I get into that stuff, the more I recognize that it's okay not to know everything. In fact, the letting go is part of the process, right? Because when you let go, the part of me that wanted to know it all was the part of me that was the unconscious, that was trying to be in control. But as you move through this and you move into higher states of being and consciousness, you recognize that actually letting go is the way you access all of that wisdom. And so in our first portal in Awakening Magical Women, and I definitely, if you aren't in that group, sorry guys, it's only for women. And that's why I'm doing, these takes here on my personal page for anyone that's interested in listening, but, hasn't uh, hasn't got the opportunity to move into, because I'm a woman, right? It's not that I'm discriminating. I'm just a woman who knows herself as a woman, and I want to, share that information. One day, maybe I'll open it up to everyone, but at the moment, I'm doing bits at a time, like not separating, but creating steps of progress as I go along, right? And I'm getting told by my intuition that this is what I'm doing. So I'm just going with that. So go into Awakening Magical Women. The first portal is called the Looking Glass, and it's all about the reflection of what is external to yourself. What is your internal terrain? What is your environment? And what is the external? What is the micro and the macro? Because everything that you see is a reflection of yourself. So all beings, all living beings, all relationships that you have in your life are part of the process of you understanding yourself. So the more you understand that we are separate, right? So we can't deny that, right? We all know that this is my body, and you're watching me on a screen, and you're sitting in your body doing whatever, maybe watching with a cup of tea, or maybe you're reading, driving a car, or whatever you might be doing. We are all separate, and we don't want to dismiss that because that's part of the process. However, we also want to recognize that we are part of this bigger living environment that we are consciously creating together, right? Or we're actually unconsciously creating, because if we're letting that part of our being that wakes up in the morning and just starts thinking, in fact, it starts thinking and dreaming, if we're not creating our setting a set point before we go to bed and supporting our dreams to be focused as well, that part of us is running rampant, right? It's just doing its own thing, and it's doing its own thing from the past. So do you get that? The whole system is that our unconscious is like a downloaded software system that is in our DNA from past lives, from all of the people in our generations before. So your mother's 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 mother, right? So you go back all the way. What were they doing? What was the consciousness of the time? There was wars, and there was famines, and there was recessions, and there was depressions, and there was total lack and survival, and limitations, and sacrifices, and all of those things, all of those moments that were in those people's lives have, if you know anything about epigenetics, you know that those levels of consciousness are actually imprinted within our DNA. So any traumas, they I don't know if it's still ongoing, but I do know of one of the studies that they did in epigenetics, and they did it on survivors of the Holocaust and their generations that are in the current reality. And these kids that had no issues in growing up, right? They had happy environments, they had, all their needs met, all of those things. They found that for whatever reason, and they were studying it to find out, they had issues with crowds. They had PTSD, chronic PTSD, and issues with loud noises, right? And so they were able to go back and recognize that this was a genetic imprint from their parents, or however far it goes back, I don't remember, maybe 3 generations now, that were Holocaust survivors, right? So they had this shock and this trauma imprinted into their DNA. So you've got generations of trauma and chaos and all of those things imprinted in the DNA, the past lives that you've had that may have had the same experiences, and then on top of that, you've got the conditions that you were put into as a child that, you know, I don't know about you, but I know even in a happy family these days, there's still chaos in our lives, right? There's still limitation. We're still living in a society, especially pre-COVID, post-COVID, you know, all of those things where we have had trauma in our life. Again, economy issues, wars, you know, political stuff, all of those things imprint into our energy field, into our DNA, and now that unconscious is the one that's running the show because it's in survival mode and it wants you to survive. So through that process, if you're not consciously making an effort to shift that energy, to wake up and take hold of your own life and consciously make your own decisions and create your reality, then you're working on autopilot from all of that past history. And that's the weight of being in a body feeling separate. That's when you feel completely separate, right? Because you're living with all of that generational baggage on your back. Just like, you know, the old lady, the bag lady in the labyrinth that came in, you know, and she had the garbage lady, I think she was called, and she came into Sarah's room and she had all this stuff on her back and she was trying to get Sarah, if you know the story, right? Sarah had just been really close to rescuing her little brother Toby, and the Labyrinth King, the whatever his name was, David Bowie, he came and he went, oh, she's too close, so put her in, hey Renee, put her, I'm glad you're enjoying it, put her in her bedroom, what looked like her bedroom again, and she lost her memory, and she's like, wasn't I doing something? I was doing something, right? And she's like, has this idea and this memory that I'm doing something. But this garbage lady comes in and, oh, remember your teddy bear, and gives her a teddy bear and tries to keep her in that unconsciousness, right? Tries to keep her unconscious so that she's dumbed down and doesn't remember her journey and her mission. Now, the soul is in that same position. The soul remembers it's here for some reason. There's this inner knowing that there's more to what we're doing. So when you're in that place where you are just allowing the unconscious to take hold, then you are in the separation. It's moving into the space of I'm choosing to create my reality. And my reality is that every single thing that is in my reality right now, all my relationships, all of the animals, all of the plants, all of the environment, everything that's around is part of your creation because you are the creator and we're looking out through our own eyes. So have a look at what's going on. What are your relationships like? This is looking into the mirror, right? This is the reflection. Who have you got in your life and what sort of relationships are you holding? Are they relationships that they could have been left, or you needed to move on as you grew in your spiritual development because they were holding you back in some way. But when you're in your separation, when you're in your unconscious, you get caught up in the beliefs of, it's not the right thing to do. I'm not a good girl if I let go of some of those relationships because I've had them for 20 years, like when you go into those limitations, then you're not on the journey that your soul is here to create. So the first portal is open. Will you take the mission and be part of this journey? Because we're going to go through every single step all the way through September. My birthday is on the 7th of September, and this year, um, lo and behold, it actually lands on a lunar eclipse. It's a full moon, I think. Anyway, there's something. I'm not right into astrology, but I've got a few friends that are, and I'm starting to get into it a little bit. But it's a big transition moment on my birthday, and I'm super excited about it. So I want to be the guide for you as the hero, as the heroine of your own story, because now is the time in consciousness where we are all, it's time to level up. It's time to wake up and unplug from the matrix and recognize ourselves as Neo in the story, and that we are here to be the hero and the heroine in our own journey. And so I would love to guide you through your own process, even when you feel like everyone is, weighing you down, everything's holding you back, but internally you know that there's more and you're looking and searching for more. I want to help you go on that journey of reclaiming that part that knows that there's more, to hold on to more of your light. So jump into Awakening Magical Women. If you don't know where the link is, just put link please in the comments and we'll send you the link. Huge blood moon for you, Elizabeth, and yeah, I'm right there. Not a good girl if I move on. It's a big thing, right? It's I've had to move on from a couple of relationships just because those people were not able to keep evolving with me, and it's a challenging situation because they're people that I absolutely love, and yet my soul and my mission, my journey as a spiritual woman, evolving into holding more capacity, more empowerment, moving into higher levels of consciousness, that's my first priority. So take care, enjoy the rest of your day. I'd love for you to drop comments in and let me know anything that jumped out at you or you enjoyed. In our Sacred Magic Portal, which is a membership that I have, we are following synchronistic numbers, and as I said that, it was 2222, which is so cool. For all the girls in there in the portal, you'll know what that means. Take care, ladies and gentlemen, and I will see you next week. See ya.